Road Safety Council.
There are growing concerns about a new variant of the coronavirus after more analysis confirmed it has a much quicker rate of transmission than the original strain. The variant has now been identified in at least 17 countries around the world after it was originally found here in the UK. It's led to a big increase in cases in Britain, and hospitals are under severe stress, with emergency healthcare staff said to be at battle stations. Our health correspondent Dominic Hughes reports.
It might be a new year, but there's no let-up in the pressure on hospitals in London and the South East. A surge in seriously ill COVID patients means staff are being pushed to the limit. Intensive care beds are a real pinch point. Some patients have been moved from Kent to Bristol and Plymouth, where there's spare capacity. That in itself is not unheard of, but doctors say it shows the pressures they're working under.
If the number of cases don't begin to reduce fairly soon and indeed reduce sharply, we would be in a situation where the healthcare infrastructure, not just in London, but across the entire country, is overwhelmed.
And it's not just rising patient numbers. Staff themselves are falling ill, meaning resources are getting stretched.
Everybody's reporting a lot of pressure. Everybody is saying that it's really difficult to offload ambulances because our departments are full, because in turn our hospitals are full. It's very frustrating because you can't look after patients in the way you want to. And when you feel helpless when you know that there's a sick patient in an ambulance which you just can't get into a department because there isn't space.
In order to provide some relief, the Nightingale Hospital in London is being made ready for non-COVID patients. But still, hospitals report the situation remains very difficult.
When we are seeing major London trusts, as we've seen in the media today, basically saying that they are under real pressure, they are at more than double the normal rate of ICU admissions than they would see. They are turning whole floors into additional ICU space. That's when we know we're in a very, very challenging place.
This surge in patient numbers is being driven by the new variant of the coronavirus. It's more contagious and it's affecting more younger people. And it's having an impact not just on hospitals in London and the South East, but right across the country. And new research highlights the impact the new variant of the virus is having on the R number, the rate at which it spreads.
Under the lockdown, maybe over the course of 2 to 3 weeks, the cases would have decreased by something like 30%. But if the new variant is now present, with this increase in the R number, all of a sudden, instead of a decrease of 30%, we get a massive increase. The number of cases over the same period could triple. So this is more or less the most serious change in the virus that we've seen since the epidemic began.
The best defence against the virus remains maintaining social distance, good hand hygiene and wearing face coverings. But the big concern is that as this new variant spreads, the extreme pressures now evident in London and the South East will soon be seen across the country. Dominic Hughes, BBC News.
Well, we heard from Professor Axel Gandhi in that report from Dominic Hughes. He helped author the report on the new variant, and he joins us now. Professor Gandhi, how much faster does this new variant move through the population than the previous variant?
Let me first say that the analysis that we're talking about here is an update, an earlier analysis that has fed into government policy over the last few weeks. It's been a real team effort of statisticians, epidemiologists, geneticists, and Public Health England to get the data together and to get this analysis done very rapidly. At the moment, these are still early days result. We only have been doing this kind of analysis now for the last few weeks. But in terms of how more rapidly it spreads, well, we estimate the R number, the reproduction number, the number of people infected per infected individual increases by about 0.4 to 0.7. But that is based on the situation of November, roughly where the lockdown in England was in place. To put these numbers a little bit into perspective, as you've already said, if we were to assume that during the lockdown the reproduction number was below 1, that means the virus was decreasing, then over the course of 2 to 3 weeks, if the reproduction number was 0.9, it wasn't quite that, but let's assume that is, over that period of time, the overall number of infections would have decreased by something like 30%. Now, if you add 0.4 to 0.7 to that reproduction number, you go above 1, you get an increase, and actually quite a steep increase. Now, the range is quite wide, so this tripling is just one number picked out of a large range. But over the course of 2 to 3 weeks, in November, the number of cases in the new variant doubled or tripled. I should probably caveat one more thing here, that it's not quite clear whether this will happen in other contexts. This is estimated based on November. It's not clear what's going to happen in the current context, where we have the new tier restrictions in place.
Professor Gandy, when the new variant was first talked about, there was some concern that it was particularly transmissible among young people. Is there any more evidence that this is the case?
Well, we've seen some evidence that a larger proportion of young people was infected by the new virus than by the other ones. But I should say this may not be due to any biological reasons. This may be simply due to the kind of effects or the restrictions that were placed on young people as opposed to older people at this point in time. Schools were open, but the lockdown for the older population was in place. So it's not quite clear of this difference, whether this difference is biological or simply a consequence of the way the restrictions were in place. 2 things to add. The differences are not that big. The new virus affects the entire population. Second thing is that in newer data, it's not quite clear. As we have come out of the lockdown in December, it seems that this difference wasn't as prominent anymore. So this is clearly something one needs to keep an eye on, but it's not quite clear whether younger people are more affected or not.
Okay, thank you very much for tracking this for us. That was Professor Axel Gandy, Chair of Statistics at Imperial College London. Well, let's take a look at some of the other stories making the news. The New York Stock Exchange says it will delist 3 Chinese telecommunications firms because of their alleged links with China's military. The move comes after President Trump signed an executive order in November barring U.S. investments in Chinese companies that were seen as a threat to U.S. national security. Rescuers in Norway have found a body in the debris of homes swallowed up by a landslide near Oslo on Wednesday. It's the first confirmed fatality. Homes were buried under mud, some left teetering over a crater caused by the slide. 9 people, including children, are still unaccounted for. And Adobe Flash, the internet browser plugin used for watching animations and playing games, is being discontinued after 24 years. Released in the early days of the web, Adobe's Flash Player was once one of the most popular ways to stream videos online. The software failed to make the transition to the smartphone era. A new era has begun for the United Kingdom after completing its formal separation from the European Union. There will be changes to many aspects of life, from travel to security, migration and business. On the first day of the separation, there's been no reported disruption to freight across the Channel between England and France. Our correspondent Mark Easton reports from the Dover port.
The dawn of a new year, and at the UK border in Dover, the start of a new chapter for cross-channel relations.
Bonjour, monsieur.
Brexit is now a reality. These lorries needing to navigate a tangle of red tape, customs checks and regulatory inspections, plus, of course, COVID tests before being permitted to cross the border. 25 miles outside the port, HGVs reach a police checkpoint on the M20. They need to have a Kent access permit, nicknamed a Kermit, to demonstrate their paperwork's in order. European truck drivers heading to the continent seemed sanguine about all the extra hassle.
I have a permission to go in England, yes.
And was that difficult? Was that an extra?
No.
Has it been difficult for you today?
No. It's okay.
I like England.
Good for you.
Traffic's usually light on New Year's Day, but with details of the trading deal with the EU published less than a week ago, many import-export companies are delaying journeys, with fears of widespread disruption to freight in the next weeks and months.
Many shipments that we had booked for next week have been cancelled, and they're choosing to get their supplies from Europe rather than coming from the United Kingdom. So I do see that there is going to be some problems, obviously, with supplies.
1,651 days since the UK voted to leave the European Union, and finally Brexit has become a reality. Now we shall see what that choice means for our relationship with our nearest neighbours and for Britain's standing around the globe.
Today is the first day of our complete independence from the European Union. Technically, we were independent on the 31st of January of last year, but of course we've just gone through the transitional period, and now that's completed. So we can say absolutely clearly that Britain is a sovereign, independent state.
Taking control of our borders has meant new infrastructure, new IT systems to speed up customs processing, but they remain largely untested. New inland border facilities, but the largest is still not ready to open. Fingers are being firmly crossed.
What the government is trying to do is essentially buy itself more time in quite a few areas. We know they're going to be waiving import controls on goods coming into the UK to allow them to be able to get the necessary systems and infrastructure in place to be able to manage that.
The government accepts there will be bumpy moments as people adapt to the new post-Brexit environment, but insists that today marks the moment when the United Kingdom takes back control of its destiny. Mark Easton, BBC News, Dover.
Well, we can cross over the English Channel now and join our correspondent Bethany Bell at the French port of Calais. Bethany, what have you seen so far today? How's it going?
There hasn't been a great deal of freight traffic today. There has been some, and the authorities here say things have gone relatively smoothly. But this is, of course, a public holiday. There's a weekend coming up. And as we heard in that report just now, a number of firms are waiting to see how things pan out over the next couple of weeks or so. And what we're hearing here is that business may not be back to normal levels until the middle of January or so. And the authorities here say that they're prepared. They've had lots of dry runs about how to carry out all these new checks and custom formalities. But the question will be whether individual companies, the exporters themselves, will be prepared, whether they'll have got their heads around all the new red tape that is now required. And the head of the port here said that congestion isn't a necessary given, but everybody has to play their part in order to prevent delays.
OK, Bethany, thank you very much, speaking to us from Calais. Well, let's speak now to the Conservative MP and prominent Brexiteer, Sir John Redwood. He was one of just 2 Conservative MPs to not vote for Boris Johnson's Brexit deal. Thank you for joining us. So why didn't you get behind the deal?
Well, I was just pressing the government for a bit more good news on fishing, but I'm very happy that we're out. I've been campaigning for this for a long time. I think the British people made a very wise judgment in 2016, and they were badly let down by the previous Parliament. So well done, the Prime Minister, in leading us out. I now want us to take full advantage of the opportunities, so I'm pressing the government to come up with exciting plans to rebuild our fishing industry and have an onshore fish processing and exporting industry, as well as to domestic consumption, to have free ports and to have enterprise zones around our coastal towns, to build up our industry again by using a sensible grant regime that's geared to British interests, by changing taxes, which we weren't allowed to get rid of. I'm glad that the tampon tax has gone already. I think there are other VAT taxes that need to go, particularly, for example, on green products. I think we can do some really exciting trade deals in the Far East, which we weren't allowed to do under EU control. So there's huge opportunity. I think we're going to have a very fast growth year this year anyway, partly as a result of recovery from the COVID disaster as the vaccines are rolled out. But I think we can supercharge that with these freedoms that we can now use.
But the report we've just heard, and Bethany Bell reporting from Calais, also said there's a lot of nervousness, there's a lot of anxiety regarding the movement of goods in and out of the country. Some businesses are choosing just to hibernate for a while and wait and see how they're going to deal with the red tape. Is that really citing the freedoms that you just mentioned?
Well, I know the BBC wants the Dover-Calais link to go wrong. I don't think it's going to go wrong.
That's true.
I think both ports are very keen to make it work. But there are all sorts of links with the continent and all sorts of ways of getting freight there, and they will take their different market shares. I think the system will work perfectly fine. We do the bulk of our trade with non-EU already, and that's always worked very smoothly. That will continue to have tariffs and some other frictions that the EU trade doesn't have under this new agreement. So be positive. It's going to work. Calais and Dover want to keep their business going, they're going to smooth those lorries' passages through. And all this nonsense about paperwork. You know, we live in the age of electronic computers and digital communications. Businesses have to collect all this information about their products and services for their own records and for their customers. They can share them electronically with the authorities on both sides of the channel to comply with their requirements.
Okay, thank you very much, Sir John Redwood. Well, stay with us on BBC World News. Still to come. With the United States lagging when it comes to vaccinating its population, we'll examine how the vaccine rollout around the world is being undertaken by different nations next.
Before you can conquer the world, you need to understand it. Know the trends, then create your own. Be inspired and understand more, because when you're armed with a wider world perspective, anything is possible. BBC News, in 42 languages. Make more of your world.
BBC experts check the facts behind the stories making the headlines. Go to the BBC News website and app to answer any questions you have about the big stories of the day. Reality Check. Get the facts straight.
If you've got questions about the stories making headlines, Reality Check is here to help you get the facts straight. Our team of experts examine the evidence and cut through the spin. Join me, Chris Morris, here on BBC World News, or go to bbc.com/reality check.
This is BBC World News, the latest headlines. Research confirms that the new coronavirus variant discovered in the UK has a much quicker rate of transmission. A new era begins as the Brexit transition period ends and the UK completes its formal separation from the European Union. COVID-19 vaccines are being rolled out around the world. Almost 10 million people have already received their first shot, but it's not being distributed evenly across the globe. Some vaccine programs are racing ahead. At the top of the list is Israel, which expects to have vaccinated over 10% of its citizens by the end of this week. China has been able to vaccinate around 4.5 million people. Meanwhile, many vaccination programs in Africa will not even start until the middle of the year. And the COVAX scheme, a WHO vaccine initiative, aims to protect 20% of the populations from 92 low and middle income countries by the end of 2021. The UK's chief medical officers have defended the COVID vaccination plan after criticism from a doctors' union. People will receive the 2 doses of the Oxford and Pfizer vaccines 12 weeks apart instead of 4 weeks. I've been speaking to Professor Adam Finn, who, with other experts, has been advising the UK government on who should get the vaccine first. He explains the reasons behind the recommended delay between the 2 jabs.
It's well known from all the vaccines that we use and have used historically that protection after a first dose doesn't just evaporate after a short period. So Pfizer are quite correct in saying that they haven't really tested doing this, but we can be fairly confident that the very high efficacy that we see even after 1 dose, just about 10 to 14 days after the administration of that dose, will persist at least reasonably well for a longer period. And the very important point is that enables us to immunise people who would have no protection at all by giving more of them a first dose in this initial crisis period.
Indeed. I mean, you say you're confident, but where does this confidence come from? I mean, if you're unsure how strong that first dose of the vaccine can be and what kind of protection it can offer, isn't it possible that the government is making a big mistake by delaying the second jab?
The confidence comes from our knowledge of the human immune response, which is very extensively studied in the context of many infections and many vaccines. And we know very well that human immunity doesn't evaporate, as I said before, after a short period of time. It continues and persists. It may wane over time, over a longer period, but we know absolutely with great certainty that it doesn't just disappear over a short period like this.
It's made some people quite nervous that the vaccine rollout strategy has been changed so quickly after it was first introduced. What assurances can you offer that it's under control and it's going to plan?
Well, in terms of assurances that it will work, because we're just starting here, we have a very strong tradition in the United Kingdom of very effective deployment of vaccines. And using them as efficiently as possible to achieve the maximum public health impact. And we're continuing to do that now. In terms of what will now happen next, well, I think we have to have confidence in our National Health Service and its ability to act quickly and effectively in delivering these vaccines as soon as they become available. And we're going to see the second vaccine coming through as early as Monday next week.
Professor Adam Finn. Well, U.S. senators have convened for a rare New Year's Day session to continue action on a major defense spending bill, which President Trump had vetoed. Senators are expected to cast procedural votes today, which will then clear the way for a veto vote Saturday. The bill had already passed both houses of Congress with a veto-proof majority of 84-13 earlier this month. Now, for a look at all the sporting news, I'm joined by Selma Kearns at the BBC Sports Centre.
Thank you very much, Celia. Let's start with what could be the biggest sporting events of 2021, the delayed Olympics and Paralympics in Tokyo. Japan's Prime Minister says they will go ahead despite concern over rising coronavirus cases in the country. The city of Tokyo is now reporting over 1,000 daily infections for the first time. Our correspondent Katie Gornell has more.
When the Tokyo Olympics were first postponed 9 months ago, it was felt back then by the IOC that a one-year delay would be enough for the world to get this pandemic under control and for the Games to get back on track. But the recent surge in cases in Tokyo really just underlines the huge difficulties still facing organisers. Remember, the cost for these games has already increased by more than £2 billion because of the pandemic. They've had to significantly lower their expectations, and the public's appetite in Japan for these games seems to be decreasing all the time. Despite that, publicly, officials seem optimistic. In response to this news, the Japanese Prime Minister said the games will go ahead in the summer and be safe and secure. But the question still remains, what form will they take? I think the next few months will be critical, and a lot depends on the success and speed of the Japanese vaccination programme. But the IOC has already said that another postponement is out of the question. So this really is the last chance saloon. Officials are confident that a form of the Games will take place in July, but I think given the current situation, no one can really say with any certainty exactly what these Tokyo Olympics will look like.
Katie Gornell, our correspondent there. Now, there are two games in the English Premier League today. Everton can go second for the time being with a win at home against West Ham. That game kicks off shortly. David Moyes is still looking for a first win at Goodison Park since leaving Everton in 2013. And then in the late game, Manchester United, who are currently second, can keep the pressure on leaders Liverpool with a result against Aston Villa. You can follow them via the BBC Sport website and app. Now, with Australia and India tied on one test apiece, Marnus Labuschagne has called for his fellow Australian batsmen to be braver in the face of the touring bowlers. The third of 4 tests begins next Wednesday in Sydney, and so far the Australians have been restricted to 200 or less runs in each of the 3 complete innings.
I certainly don't want to share all our plans with you guys because otherwise they'll know exactly what's coming. But I definitely think there's definitely talk about, once again, rotating the strike, finding your boundary option, the normal things you talk about facing any bowling attack and where you can get a little upper hand against a certain bowler at a certain time in the game. So I think they're all things we're always talking about and always trying to stay on top of and make sure that when we come in to the test, we are brave enough to take on those options when they arise.
As always, you can stay right up to date on the BBC Sport website and app. But for me, for the moment, that's it for now.
Thank you, Sarah. Well, millions around the world have been seeing out 2020 and marking the start of 2021. With lockdowns or other restrictions in place in many countries, many would-be New Year partygoers were told to have a quiet night in. Although thousands of spectators watched fireworks light up the night sky in Taiwan to mark the beginning of 2021. But in New York City, just a handful of people were allowed into Times Square to watch confetti rain down and the traditional crystal ball drop. Scotland celebrated behind closed doors, and instead of fireworks, they staged a drone show with a series of videos titled Farewell. And that's all from us for now. Do join us on Twitter. I'm at Celia Hatton. Bye-bye.
Hello there. The last week or so has been cold across the northern plains of India. There's been warnings of ground frost and some fog as well. But for the next few days, it's not going to be as cold and there won't be as much fog around as well. To the south, you can see we've got this massive cloud that's been developing, and that continues to bring some showers, heavy and thundery in the same sort of areas, returning again into Sri Lanka and also into Tamil Nadu. And if you look much further north, we're even beginning to pick up a few showers around Delhi. That's one reason why it's not going to be as cold by day and by night. Into Central Asia, we've got some very cold air actually across the north into Kazakhstan. Elsewhere, temperatures are nearer normal for the time of year, possibly making double figures in Kabul. It'll be dry and mostly sunny, I suspect, in Pakistan. There's those showers, though, beginning to develop on Saturday. Moving further south and probably dry for Kerala, more likely to have some perhaps heavy and thundery showers developing in Tamil Nadu and not far away from the Maldives. We'll see some more breaking out in Sri Lanka as well. But across the northern plains, temperatures will be a little bit higher day and night. So let's have a look at the outlook, and we may actually pick up a few showers in Islamabad as we head into next week. We're also likely to get more showers around Delhi, spreading their way southwards into parts of Rajasthan and also into Madhya Pradesh. But for many areas, it's still dry and sunny.
आइसक्रीम खाएगी? आइसक्रीम? ये है डबल आनंद। पहला आनंद पॉलिसी टर्म के अंत पर मैच्योरिटी क्लेम का पूरा भुगतान, और दूसरा आपके अपनों के लिए लाइफ कवर की पूरी रकम बिना किसी प्रीमियम के। LIC न्यू जीवन आनंद, आनंद ही आनंद।
For me, being British means having a sense of unity, but I think that's been dissolved. As I've grown up, and ideologies that I thought stood in place don't actually stand for anything. So it doesn't mean anything to be British other than really to have a queen in the Commonwealth.
Oh, that's a thinker, isn't it? It doesn't mean anything, does it? It doesn't matter.
Disrespectful, people are rude, people are scruffy, all that sort of thing. Not at all. Not at all the English way now.
We're an amalgamation of things because, the amount of countries that we took over and then, well, that didn't pan out so well. But the amount of other places that we took over, we've picked up so many different things, and because we have so many people living here, same as every country does, just a mix of everything, it's so difficult now to say that yes, this one thing is British.
I'm Katty Kay from BBC News, and I'm based in Washington.
And I'm Carlos Watson from Aussie Media, journalist and entrepreneur.
Together, we'll bring you the ideas that are reshaping America.
Conversations on a country undergoing change.
For a fresh perspective.
A new weekly podcast, When Katty Met Carlos.
Everything is connected in the world of business. Find out what it means to you. Go online at bbc.com/business to get the latest news wherever you are. Business on BBC News. Make the connection.